The New Year's Eve party was supposed to be a celebration, a night of laughter, music, and the anticipation of a fresh start. Friends and neighbors gathered in the warmth of a cozy living room, glasses clinking, the air filled with excitement. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, something shifted. A chilling question lingered in the background, hanging over the crowd like an unspoken truth. What if the person you trust the most, your closest neighbor, was hiding a deadly secret? And what if that secret would come to light in the most horrifying way possible? In the midst of the revelry, the atmosphere suddenly shifted. A scream pierced the air, sharp, cutting through the merriment. Panic spread like wildfire as guests stumbled back from the scene. It was too late to save him. Someone had died. Someone who had been part of the party just moments before. The victim's identity is shrouded in mystery for now, but what we know is this. He was someone deeply connected to the people at the party, someone whose life was unexpectedly and violently taken. Who was responsible, and why did it happen? The evening, which began with joyful celebration, would soon unravel into a nightmare that would leave everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about their closest friends and neighbors. Secrets, lies, and betrayals that were once hidden in the shadows would now come to the light. This is the story of a murder that rocked a seemingly peaceful neighborhood, and the truth that no one could have ever imagined. On the surface, the neighborhood appeared to be just like any other. Quiet, peaceful, a place where children played outside and families waved to each other as they went about their daily routines. The houses, neatly lined up on suburban streets, were the epitome of a well-kept community, each one carefully curated to look just like the next. It was a place where everything seemed to be in order, where the problems of the world felt distant, far from the idyllic lives of the people who lived there. But what appeared to be a picture-perfect neighborhood was hiding a much darker truth. Behind closed doors, neighbors were hiding secrets, some known only to the closest friends, others buried so deeply that even the people living next to them could never have imagined what was really going on behind the facade of smiles and pleasantries. This neighborhood, where trust should have been at its highest, was about to be rocked by a crime that no one could have anticipated. It all started on New Year's Eve, a night meant for celebrating the turning of a new year, filled with laughter, food, and drink. At first it seemed like just another ordinary gathering. The host, a well-liked man named David Larkin, had invited a few of his closest neighbors over for a party. Among the guests were his longtime friends, the Jones family, whose daughter Emily had just turned 21. Emily, who had grown up across the street from David, was like a daughter to him, and the two families shared years of memories, all of them seemingly perfect. But as midnight approached and the festivities reached their peak, something in the air changed. The joy that filled the room quickly turned to confusion, then to fear. A scream echoed down the hallway. Guests who had been chatting and toasting only moments before rushed toward the sound. What they found was far worse than anyone could have ever expected. David Larkin was found dead, his body crumpled on the floor in the middle of the living room, his face twisted in pain. The scene was gruesome, yet it wasn't the physical violence alone that made this murder so chilling. It was the betrayal that it represented. The people closest to David, the ones who had shared meals, laughter, and countless memories, were now left to wonder, who could do this? Who could be capable of such an act within their tight-knit community? The investigation would quickly reveal something that shocked everyone. The killer wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone from outside the neighborhood. No, the person responsible for David's death was someone he knew intimately, someone he had trusted, a family member. A neighbor, a person who had shared countless evenings just like this one, had laughed and celebrated with him. The unraveling of this tragedy would reveal just how deep the lies and the deception ran. This wasn't just the murder of one man. It was the collapse of an entire community's sense of security and trust. As the investigation unfolded, dark secrets about David's life, and the lives of those closest to him, began to surface. Secrets that would leave everyone questioning how well they really knew those they called neighbors. The night began like any other New Year's Eve party in this quiet suburban neighborhood. The sky was painted with the deep blues of nightfall, and the house, David Larkin's home, was alive with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses and the murmur of excited chatter. The Christmas decorations had just been taken down, but the warmth of the season still hung in the air. It was a time for new beginnings, for hopes and resolutions. Around the house, guests gathered in small groups, exchanging plans for the year ahead. There were hugs, smiles, and toasts, all marking the final moments of a year soon to be forgotten. David was at the center of it all, the life of the party, as always. Tall, with a broad smile and a deep voice that seemed to carry an air of authority and friendliness, David was known for making everyone feel at ease. His wife Helen stood beside him, laughing at a joke David had made, her eyes twinkling with joy. Their two children, Emily and Sam, were there too, enjoying the familiar atmosphere of a family celebration. The guest list included neighbors who had become like family, longtime friends who had shared holiday meals for years, and acquaintances who had come for the festivities, perhaps for the first time. Among the guests was Laura Hayes, a neighbor who had known David and his family for more than a decade. Laura had always been close to the Larkins, especially David. There was history between them, something that seemed to go beyond just casual friendship. Laura's eyes often lingered on David, her smile just a little too lingering at times, but on that evening, no one would have suspected that anything was amiss. The party went on as expected. People made their resolutions for the new year, toasting to health, prosperity, and happiness. But behind the sparkling conversation and the clinking glasses, subtle currents of tension began to emerge. David, in his usual boisterous manner, teased his best friend Kevin about his New Year's resolution to finally get serious about his career. Kevin, a tall, stocky man who had been David's friend for over 15 years, smiled awkwardly, brushing off the jibe with a nervous laugh. But there was something in his eyes, something that said the playful tease didn't sit well with him. It was small, a momentary exchange, yet it was enough to show that not all was perfect. Kevin, though outwardly smiling, seemed just a little too quiet, his gaze a little too fixed on David, as if measuring every word and action. In the corner of the room, Laura stood, her drink held tightly in her hand, watching the interactions with a certain intensity. She spoke little, but every time David laughed or joked with another guest, her expression grew colder. She was not the only one to notice the distance between her and David that night. The tension between them was undeniable to anyone who had known them well. Yet on the surface, everything remained calm, the kind of tension that only those closest to them would understand. As midnight drew nearer, the celebratory energy began to rise again, but it was clear that something had shifted. Conversations had slowed, and while some guests appeared to be lost in the moment, others looked around uneasily, as if sensing that something was about to happen. Then, just before the countdown to midnight, the first signs of real trouble emerged. A sudden loud voice echoed through the house, breaking the cheerful chatter. It came from the kitchen, where Samantha, David's daughter, had been talking to Laura. The argument seemed to come out of nowhere. Words were exchanged, angry, biting words, too fast to understand at first, but the tone of Samantha's voice was unmistakable. The tension was palpable. It was a minor squabble over something trivial, maybe a misunderstanding, but as the words were exchanged, it was clear that something deeper was at play. Laura's face turned a shade darker as she yelled back, her words sharp and cold, aimed directly at Samantha's character, hitting nerves that had never been touched before. Samantha's voice faltered for a moment, before she shot back with a retort that made the room freeze. The once joyous atmosphere had shifted. Guests looked around, unsure of what to do. David had been in the middle of a conversation when he overheard the argument. He turned towards the kitchen, his expression hardening. He excused himself from the group and made his way to the scene. The tension between father and daughter was instant. Samantha's face, flushed with emotion, met her father's eyes with a mixture of defiance and frustration. David's voice, though calm, held a sharpness that only a father could muster in moments like this. "You've gone too far, Laura," he said quietly, though it was clear to anyone who could hear that it was no longer just an argument about some misplaced words. Laura's face went pale, her lips pressing into a thin line. She turned away, her back rigid, refusing to meet David's gaze. It was obvious that whatever had been simmering between them for months, maybe years, had come to a boiling point that night. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the chaos that had flared up between the Larkins and their closest friends seemed to subside, at least on the surface. The argument seemed to have blown over, the coldness that lingered afterward hanging in the air like a storm cloud on the horizon. People returned to their glasses and mingled uneasily, as though nothing had happened. But there was something in the air that everyone could feel, a shift that no one could put into words. As the countdown began, everything fell silent. 10 seconds left. 9, 8. But in that moment, the fireworks outside the house were drowned out by the scream that shattered the fragile calm. A scream that would haunt everyone for the rest of their lives. A scream that marked the beginning of a tragedy no one could have foreseen. The countdown had just finished. 100 voices rang out in unison, shouting, "Happy New Year!" and clinking glasses together in a symphony of joy and celebration. The laughter was loud, the room full of life as everyone embraced the beginning of a new chapter. But in an instant, all of that changed. Piercing screams shattered the sound of the cheers. It came from the hallway near the kitchen, and it was unlike any scream anyone had ever heard. A cry of sheer horror, of disbelief, that echoed through the house. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, all at once, chaos erupted. People rushed toward the sound, their faces painted with confusion, with a deep instinct to understand what had just gone wrong. And then they saw it. David Larkin, the host of the party, the life of every gathering, was lying motionless on the floor. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide open, staring into nothing. The horror of the scene hit everyone like a physical blow. This wasn't a joke or a prank. This wasn't a bad dream. This was real. And David was dead. For a split second, no one moved. It was as though the room itself had been frozen in time. No one could comprehend what had just happened. But reality soon set in, and the panic spread like wildfire. People scrambled to call 911, but the air was thick with confusion, anger, and fear. Some guests were in shock, their faces drained of color. Others began to cry, collapsing into the arms of whoever was closest. No one could process how something so horrific had come from a night meant for celebration. It was as if the entire fabric of the evening had been torn apart in one brutal instant. What happened to David? Was this premeditated? Had someone planned it all along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Or was this a crime of passion, an outburst of rage, something long building up that finally exploded? The truth seemed as hazy as the smoke rising from the fireplace, thick and elusive. It was too soon to know for sure, but one thing was clear. The man who had always been the center of every gathering was now lying dead, and the weight of it was suffocating. A few moments later, the sirens wailed in the distance, the flashing lights painting the neighborhood in stark reds and blues, a harsh contrast to the festive decorations. The police arrived with an unsettling speed, their faces stern, their movements calculated. They didn't need to be told what had happened. It was clear by the way they immediately took control of the situation, ushering guests into different rooms, separating them for questioning, and transferring them to an outside waiting room while they searched for anything useful to return. They had seen it all before, they knew what they were up against. The house, once filled with laughter and music, had now become a crime scene. As officers began securing the area, it was clear that this wasn't just an accident. The scene wasn't one of an unfortunate mishap. The signs pointed to something far darker. There was blood, spilled in places where it shouldn't have been. Evidence of a struggle. Something didn't add up. Someone here knew exactly what had happened. The question was, who? The first detective on the scene, Detective Marissa Langley, was an experienced investigator, her face a mask of focus as she walked through the house. She looked around carefully, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, every face. She noted the people standing apart from the crowd, eyes wide in disbelief, as though the shock hadn't quite hit them yet. She looked at the body, the position of it. There was a certain kind of finality to it, the way David lay there, unnaturally still. The blood on the floor told its own story, though the full details would come later. What stood out to her was that it wasn't just a random act of violence. The scene felt deliberate. Her mind raced as she mentally ticked off the possible scenarios. Was it premeditated? Had someone been waiting for this opportunity to strike? Or had it been a moment of rage, an explosion of emotion that turned deadly? One thing was certain: the guests knew David. They knew him better than anyone. The only question now was, did one of them know him too well? As the investigation began, the officers questioned every guest: friends, family, and neighbors. Everyone who had been at the party was a potential suspect. There were whispers in the air, uncomfortable looks exchanged behind the backs of others. Every person who had been there that night was now under suspicion. Could one of them be capable of murder? Was it someone close to him? A family member? A longtime friend? Or someone who had been harboring a grudge for far too long? Everyone seemed to have their own theory about what happened, but the truth was still hidden. There were people who seemed too composed, others too emotional. Some had been too close to David, others too distant. The circle of trust that had once defined the Larkin household was now fractured. Now that you've heard what happened, let's step back for a moment. This case has only just begun to unravel. As we dig deeper into the events leading up to that tragic New Year's Eve, it's hard to ignore the questions lingering in the air. Who could do something like this? What could drive someone to take the life of another in the blink of an eye? And more importantly, who is behind it? This is where you come in. As you've seen, the investigation is complex. There are so many twists and turns, so many potential theories about what might have happened. But here's where it gets even more interesting. You have the power to help shape the direction of this investigation, in a way, by offering your own thoughts and theories. What do you think happened that night? Was it a well-planned murder, carefully orchestrated to look like a tragic accident? Or did emotions run high, leading to a moment of rage that no one could have predicted? Could one of the guests, the closest friends, family members, or neighbors, have been hiding their true intentions all along? We want to know what you believe. Do you think the police are on the right track? Or is there something they're overlooking? Do you believe one of the suspects is hiding something? Maybe you've already started connecting the dots, seeing things that we haven't revealed yet. Let us know your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you're intrigued by this case. If you've found yourself captivated by the twists and turns, and you want to continue exploring the mystery with us, hit that subscribe button. There's more to this story, and we'll be uncovering every detail, one piece at a time. Every new development brings more questions, and your involvement makes it even more engaging. So, take a moment right now, comment below with your thoughts, and subscribe to stay up to date. We're diving deeper into the investigation, and as we piece together the puzzle, we'll need you by our side. So stay tuned, because this story is far from over. We'll continue to ask the tough questions, uncover hidden truths, and unravel the mystery one step at a time. Your thoughts could change everything. Do you have the answers? Let's find out together. As the investigation unfolded, one piece after another, things began to look a lot less like a tragic accident and more like a carefully constructed facade. The path seemed straightforward at first: confusion, chaos, and an evening gone horribly wrong. But with each passing hour, the pieces started to fall into place, revealing a picture that no one expected. There were moments when the truth felt within reach, only to slip away, just out of grasp. But then, in the most unexpected of places, a breakthrough came. The key piece of evidence: a hidden journal. Buried away, tucked under the floorboards of the house where the party had taken place, it wasn't the kind of discovery anyone anticipated. It had been sitting there all along, silent, waiting. The pages, scribbled with frantic notes, contained more than just thoughts or dreams. They held confessions, damning, raw, and unsettling confessions from someone who had been in plain sight the whole time. As investigators pieced together this journal, the revelation became clear. The person everyone had overlooked, the person who had always seemed so innocent, was no stranger to darkness. It was the trusted neighbor, the one everyone had called a friend. But this discovery, as shocking as it was, left the investigators with one simple question. Was this the truth, or merely the surface? The journal painted a chilling picture of someone harboring secrets, a person capable of deceit and manipulation. But was the murder premeditated? Was this the final act of a long-running plan? Or had this been a crime of opportunity, born out of a single moment of rage? For the family, the friends, and the neighbors, the pieces fit, but it still didn't bring the closure they had hoped for. The person arrested was one of their own, and as the truth came out, it raised more questions than answers. Was the entire community blind to the true nature of the people around them? Had they all missed the signs? The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. There were still unanswered questions, details that didn't add up, and new twists emerging at every corner. As the investigation continued, there was still the possibility of an even darker truth lying beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. And as the case went to trial, the tension didn't ease. Was this just the tip of the iceberg? What were the real motives behind the crime? Could there be more victims, more people who had been unknowingly caught in the crossfire of a game that had been played for years? The justice system, it seemed, wasn't equipped to answer these questions just yet. The trial revealed pieces that shook the courtroom, but also left room for speculation. What had driven this person to murder? And were they alone in the web of deception? But there's one thing that remains undeniable. In that quiet neighborhood, the person closest to you, the one you trust with everything, could be hiding something that no one ever sees coming. Was it the end of this tale, or just another chapter in a much larger story? What started as a neighborhood gathering, a moment of celebration, has now turned into a haunting question that won't leave any of us. The party that was supposed to ring in the new year has instead left us wondering, what do we truly know about the people we trust the most? The case is far from over. As we peel back more layers, we'll discover that the answers we seek may only lead to more questions. What really happened that night? And who is behind the mask? If you're captivated by this case and eager to explore even more twists in this story, stay with us. This is just the beginning. Keep your eyes open and never stop asking the question, who can you trust? If you've been intrigued by what you've heard today, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to stay updated as we continue to unravel this complex mystery. What do you think happened? Who is the true mastermind behind this tragedy? We need your thoughts to piece together the final chapter of this story. There's always more to uncover, and we'll be here to reveal every shocking detail, one layer at a time. The case, as it stands, has come to a staggering halt. The police have their suspect, the community has its answers, but something feels off. There's a part of this story that doesn't sit right. The timeline matches, the evidence checks out, and yet, there's a shadow lingering at the edges of the investigation, one that refuses to be swept aside. Because what about the final moments before the crime? What about the cryptic, almost chilling note that was found tucked inside the victim's jacket, hidden from view for days after the murder? A message that nobody noticed at first, but once revealed, raised more questions than it answered. Was it a confession? A threat? Or something far more chilling that no one could yet comprehend? And even more unsettling, what about the phone call made just hours before the party, from the victim to someone who, at the time, appeared completely unrelated to the investigation? That phone call, lost in the noise of the evening's festivities, might hold the key to unraveling everything. But what was said? Was the tragedy at that New Year's Eve party the result of something long simmering? Or had it been set into motion by one final, unexpected turn of events? But perhaps the most unsettling question of all, what happens next? The truth might be closer than we think, but the final answers, the pieces we're still missing, may be more complicated and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. With so many layers still to uncover, can we truly trust what we've been told so far? There is still so much left to explore, and as the investigation continues, we'll be asking questions that could change everything. What was the real motive? What part of the story are we still missing? And who, in the end, can truly be trusted. As we wait for new information to surface, the chilling truth is this: some mysteries, no matter how deep you dig, never truly vanish. And some questions once asked cannot be ignored. And this is just the beginning. If you're still on the edge of your seat, if you feel like there's more to this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. We'll be back with more pieces of the puzzle, because when it comes to this case, the answers are far from clear. What do you think happened that night? Was the killer caught? Or is there more to this tragedy than meets the eye? We'll see you in the next chapter. If you want to keep exploring this chilling mystery with us, make sure to subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with anyone you know who loves a good puzzle. Do you believe the investigation is as straightforward as it seems? Or is there still more lurking beneath the surface?